Hello, second and fourth period classes. I'm going to walk you guys through all of your stuff for today. Hopefully, this finds you well. I am recording from my kitchen table. Hopefully, you are listening from somewhere more comfy. So you can be doing class with me on the other end. So here we go. A couple of things. First off, fourth period and second period have strikingly similar classrooms. So regardless of which one that we're looking at, know that yours is going to look the same way, whether you're in second period or fourth period. A couple of things you need to be aware of are that my office hours are technically from 11 to 1 o'clock. If you want to request to message chat using Google Hangouts, not video chat, but message chat, so typing, those are the prime times to do it. I cannot guarantee that I will be available instantly just for you outside of those times. Outside of those times, though, please feel free to email me. I will get back to you as soon as possible. I just know that live messaging 11 to 1 are kind of the ideal times. I know that other teachers have office hours for earlier times or later times, and so my times are 11 to 1. So first of all, there were a handful of people that requested that I post everything according to the day. So all of your material for March 18th would be together all in one place. And so I've done that. So what you want to avoid is scrolling in the stream for long periods of time because that's exhausting. What you want to do is you want to start by clicking on the classwork tab. You will see something there for Wednesday, March 18th. Everything that you need for March 18th is here. Now, all of these things I will be posting ahead of time. This is technically available now. It is Monday. So as far as I'm concerned, you are more than welcome to go into these things and start on them ahead of time before Wednesday if you would like. Just be aware that there are a couple of things that are due by the end of the day Wednesday that you need to make sure are done so that way you can move forward successfully for Friday class. So first thing that you'll notice is that there is a material post that says March 18th, check-in with video. I am currently recording this video, so you will not see it attached here now, but this video will be attached to this form, or if I can figure out how to do this, I will embed this video into this check-in so that way you can watch it within the form. If I can figure out how to be fancy, I will do it. If not, then we won't be fancy, but you'll see the video posted. So the first thing that you're going to want to do for the day is click on the Google form so you can check in. So you'll see Wednesday, March 18th, check in. It's going to ask to check yourself in. Are you here or are you not here? If you select no, it's going to tell you to go back and try again. So please click yes. You are here. Check yourself in. The next question is, did you watch the video with the clear directions walking you through the process for today? Please do not say yes until you have watched this video all the way through. Once you have watched this video all the way through, then you may click yes. If you say no, it is going to send you back and tell you to please watch the video. So watch the video all the way through so you know exactly what's going on. Then say yes, and then you can continue with the form. This next part of the form is going to ask to make sure that you clearly understand the things that are required for you today. If there are any things that you don't quite understand, you can ask me those questions in the next part. Ideally, you need to make sure that you understand what is due and what is being asked of you. If you have questions about those particular things, the next part of the form will provide a place for you to ask those questions, or to request a message chat with me so we can directly talk live about the questions that you have. So the first part is going to be that you state that you understand that you need to continue reading for your assigned book and that you need to be halfway through it by the end of this week. So by the end of the day, Friday. I understand that some of you are behind and you have some catching up to do. For those of you that are behind, you've got a lot of time at home right now, so I recommend that you do a lot of reading. You can utilize spring break if you get behind, but at this point, considering you have time at home and that most of you have links to the audio format of your book, you should be able to get caught up this week. So let's talk about how far you need to be in your book. If you go to your classwork section, you will see something that says essential question number 2, classroom discussion. This is where your EQ document has moved. The directions have slightly changed, but some of this information in these documents is not. So what you'll want to do is click on the book that you are currently reading. If you are reading Watership Down, for example, you will need to have read through chapters 18 to 27, so all the way to page 242. This is about halfway. If you're struggling, the audiobook links are available here all the way through chapter 22, and that should get you situated with the story. If you're reading Audacity, you do not have audio links, but it is poetry, so it shouldn't be too entirely difficult. You are in A day. Just keep that in mind for later. You will need to read through all the way until 183. So you'll stop at the poem that is called Make It Right. For Billy Creekmore, if you're reading Billy Creekmore, you will read through chapters 16. So that includes chapter 16. You will read all the way through page 145. Again, the audio links are posted here. That should help you get caught up. So if we go back to our Wednesday form, you understand what halfway means because it says so in those documents. So this next part is asking you to state that you understand that you need to continue with the Curiosity Exploration number 2 document and complete it by the end of the week, which is the end of the day this Friday, with your curious questions and ideas. As a note, only step 1 and 2 need to be completed. You do not need to do step 3. You can delete it. So let's talk about that. Let's go to classwork. Here's your Wednesday information. This is Curiosity Exploration number 2. Some of you began working on this document towards the end of this last week before we went to the weekend, but most of you have not. So I want to talk you through this process. So click on Curiosity Exploration number 2. You will see a document that looks a little bit like this. You will see that it has steps 1, 2, and 3. What you need to do is highlight step 3 and delete it. We are not doing step 3. No step 3 for us, for you. So it's going to ask you as you're reading to identify 3 potential curiosities from your reading and to explore one of them as much as possible. So what we will do is also delete this because we're not doing a discussion post this week. So for step 1, it will walk you through the process of what it means to ask a curious question. And to make a note of what a curiosity is. So what you will be doing is as you are reading, maybe there's something that you come across that you have a question about. So for example, if you're reading Audacity, you know that Clara is a Russian Jew and things aren't going so great for her and her family, and they start talking about immigrating over to the United States. So you might have a question that might be something like, I wonder what it was like to be an immigrant coming to the United States in the early 1900s. This is a question that is not specific to our story. We are not asking questions like, will Clara make it to the United States safely? That is a question that only can be answered by reading more of your book or by asking the author. We don't want to ask questions like that. We want to ask general questions like, what was it like to immigrate over to the United States in the early 1900s? This is a real life sort of question. This is a question that can be answered by Googling a little bit and doing some research, looking at pictures, reading articles. Those are the types of questions that we want to ask. So maybe my question is, what was it like to immigrate over to America in the early 1900s? That is the question that you will ask in this side of the box. On the left side of the box, you will tell me exactly what line you read from the book that made you think this question. So maybe Clara started talking about immigrating over to America, and that was the part that made you wonder. That would be the part that you would put in this section of the book. The next part, step 2, is to decide which curious thing you want to research. So if we go up to step 1 again, you should have 3 different quotes with 3 different questions that they made you think about. So when you go to step 2, you will choose one of those and you will do some research. So maybe you're reading Billy Creekmore and you got to a part where you noticed that Billy Creekmore wasn't being dealt with so nicely by the adults and that it seemed like he was maybe being abused. And so maybe your question was, were there child abuse laws in the early 1900s? That could be a question that we want to answer. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to research that. So can I do some Googling to find out if there were child abuse laws in the early 1900s or if that was something that happened later? Because what we want to find out is, were there laws in the book? Like, were there child abuse laws in place in the 1900s that maybe could have prevented Billy Creekmore or prevented Billy Creekmore from being abused, or maybe that wasn't a thing at that time, and that would explain why Billy Creekmore was being abused. So you're going to research. You have 3 columns, or 3 rows, excuse me. So you have each of these rows for 3 different sources. So if you don't necessarily have to use all 3, but if you find one source and don't learn too much from it, the expectation is that you continue to research until you find a decent amount of information so you could really answer your question well. So I'm going to do some research, for example, to find out, were there child abuse laws in the early 1900s? And then in the second part, I'm going to report back what I learned. So maybe your resource was really great and had a ton of information. I am not asking you to give me a play-by-play of all 50 facts that you learned. I'm asking you to give me the highlights. So what were the big parts that you learned? Obviously, if you only come up with one thing that you learned from this resource, you need to continue to do more research, or you need to report back a little bit more of what you learned. The third part is going to ask for next steps. So after you do this research, what do you want to do with this information? Do you want to continue doing a little bit more research? Do you realize that your first source wasn't that great of a source? Are you curious now about something more specific about this particular thing that you were researching? Maybe you did find out that there were child abuse laws in the 1900s and were curious about how they actually started or what caused someone to decide to put in place some laws. So what are things that you want to know more about? What are your next steps moving on? And then this last part is having you think about the final project that we're going to be doing in a handful of weeks after we get back from spring break. So this particular part, regardless of whether we will see each other after spring break or not, at this point, I'm assuming we'll be back in school after spring break. But even if we're not, this particular project is something that can be done fully electronically. So you need to be thinking about it in advance anyway. So our final project does involve you creating a presentation where you're going to teach your audience about what you've learned, and you're going to include something for them to interact with. So let's say that you were looking into, let's say you're reading Audacity and you decided that you were going to look into Ellis Island and what that process was like for people to immigrate over to the United States in the early 1900s. And you create a presentation where you're telling us all this information, you're sharing it out and letting us know what inspired you and all this stuff. And then you need to create a part where we can interact with your information. How do you know that we learned anything from your presentation? Is there anything that could make this more exciting for us? So you could maybe create a game or some sort of quiz that happens electronically that the audience could interact with afterwards. You could create a Google form that turns into a sort of choose your own adventure thing. Like, what if I was an immigrant coming over to the United States? Could I, kind of like a game of life scenario on Google Forms that you could create, like Oregon Trail sort of thing? Could you maybe create some sort of step-by-step guide for how we could make something? Was there something that you learned or something that you might have learned how to make that would be fun to create your own? And could you create a how-to guide for us to create our own from wherever we're at with whatever materials? You want to think of a way that you could get your audience to interact with that information. And so this last column is for you to put all of your brainstorming ideas of what you could do. If you were going to give us a presentation about how immigrants came over to the United States and how they went through Ellis Island in the early 1900s, what could you then create that makes this really exciting for us that we could kind of do? Okay, and then you're going to get to the last part where there is a step 3. If your document has this, please delete it. We do not need step 3. We're not going to do that part. So you may delete all of that. Only step 1 and step 2. When you're finished with this part, you are done with that. This will be due ideally by the end of the day on Friday, regardless whether you're an A day or a B day person. The end of the week is when this is due. So you're going to go to this form and you're going to say that, yes, you understand this now. You understand that you need to do this and it's due at the end of the week. Okay, moving on to the next part. The next part is going to state that you understand that you need to complete the second column, which is rising action of navigating the story by the end of the week. This is the part that you're going to be doing as you're reading. So you want to go back to the Google Classroom and you will see navigating the story. You want to click on that. You will notice that the rising action deadline has been updated to reflect that it is due by the end of the day Friday. You will also notice that a few people in second period have already turned this in because they are done with it. So hopefully they've done the exposition and the rising action. If you are one of those people that turned this document in because you finished part 1, but you haven't done part 2, you need to go into this assignment, unsubmit it, and continue working on the rising action. You are more than welcome to turn it in when you finish rising action. Either way, I will be able to go in and see it, but this way I will know that you are officially done with it, at least with the rising action part. So you'll go into this document. You should have the first column done, the exposition. The exposition was all about who the characters were, how they were connected, what they're like, the current setting that they live in, and what the possible trouble might be for them, the possible conflicts. The second column is rising action, and this is the part that you are going to complete this week as you read through your book this week. So the first question is going to ask what trouble is starting to brew. This is fairly similar to the last question of the exposition. So you might have been presented with a possible problem, but you might have noticed that things are starting to get worse. So the idea with rising action, the idea is that the conflict is becoming so problematic that eventually we will reach a climax. And that's where we have the most intense moment of the book, and then we kind of come down from that. So with the rising action, you should notice that things are potentially getting worse, or that things are starting to happen. Things are moving faster. So what potential trouble is starting to brew? What is getting a little bit worse? The second question is asking where, who, and or what are the obstacles? So let's think about our main characters. Are they in a position where the setting is a possible obstacle to them? Do they have people in their lives that are possible obstacles to their hopes, their dreams, or whatever it is that they're wanting? Are there things that are possible obstacles that are in their way? So if you read about Clara in Audacity, you know that she's wanting to immigrate to the United States with their family. One of those obstacles in order to getting there is the ocean. She has to cross the ocean and successfully reach New York. the ocean itself is a setting. She finds herself in a boat, and that is kind of a setting that is presenting itself as an obstacle to her. The third question is going to ask, how do the characters deal with them? So how do the characters deal with these obstacles that are in their way? Do they persevere through these things? And if so, how? What is it that they're doing in order to remove these possible obstacles? And maybe they haven't removed these obstacles yet, but how are they choosing to deal with these obstacles? Are they frightened? Do they respond by crying a lot? Do they respond by talking to other friends and encouraging one another? How is it that they're responding to these possible obstacles? The fourth question asks, how do the characters interact with one another and with obstacles and with their surroundings? So what are these characters doing and how are they interacting with these things? How do they interact with their family members or with other characters that are close to them? How are they interacting with their surroundings? How are they interacting with those obstacles? And then the last question is going to ask, what is the impact of the setting on the character, the plot, and the conflict? So think about the setting. The setting is changing for the people in our books. So for Watership Down, we have rabbits who are moving from one place to another, and their setting is kind of changing as they go. In Audacity, we have Clara who is moving from one country to another, and so her setting is changing. And then we have Billy Creekmore, who is kind of a wanderer, and his setting is changing as well. He's going from an orphanage to the mines of West Virginia. So as the setting changes, how is that impacting our characters? How is it impacting how the storyline moves along? Does it make the plot move along faster? And so we're getting to a point where we're reaching a climax and then maybe coming down from it later on. How is it impacting the conflict where we've got lots of problems? Maybe we have more problems because we move to one place, or maybe we have less problems because we move to another place. So how does the setting impact all of that? So that is navigating the story, and that is the rising action column. So we will go back to our Google form and we'll say that we understand that we need to complete that second column by the end of the week. This very last part is the part that's a little bit tricky. The last part is going to ask you to move your discussion response. Instead of doing it on Goodreads, we are moving it into Google Classroom. And the reason why we're doing that is because this format, I like Goodreads as a place for you guys to post and be able to see what other people are thinking that are not in your class about the book that you're reading, about the same book that you're reading. The downside is that Goodreads is not as conducive for discussion, for responding back to people and learning from others. And so we are going to move that onto Google Classroom for this week for like obvious reasons, since we're doing things in this format. So let's talk about that. It says, I understand that I need to post my initial response to the essential question number 2 classroom discussion in Google Classroom instead of doing the Goodreads discussion post for this week. It says, if I have already posted my response in Goodreads, I know that I need to copy and paste that response into the classroom discussion instead. So I know that some of you guys are ahead. A handful of you are ahead and got your second discussion post done. For those of you that did do that in Goodreads, I will ask you to copy and paste it into this discussion post in Google Classroom. So that way everyone can read it and we can start to respond and kind of have a informal, think of it as an informal Socratic circle, and you can respond and talk to each other about your different books in Google Classroom. So I'm going to talk you through what that looks like. So if you go into Classroom again, you'll see essential question number 2, classroom discussion. And this is where your very first, the bigger thing is due at the end of this class day, at the end of Wednesday. So what you need to do is you're going to see that it says to use the attached essential question 2 document, so you know what your directions are to respond to the question. And it also says that the classroom discussion is going to replace the Goodreads discussion this week. So the idea is that you read and reply to one another in this space. So my view is going to look a little bit different than yours, so bear with me. But if you click on your document, it should send you to your book, and it looks almost exactly the same as it did the last time I saw you guys. You have your audiobook links. You will just see that there are a couple of things that have changed with due dates. So it will say that you have an initial post that is due by the end of the day on Wednesday, and then you're going to end up having a follow-up response that you'll need to do on Friday, but I will not provide you those directions until we get there because I would like you to pace yourself. So for this first part, our first post for Wednesday, your questions are the same. Your essential questions are exactly the same as they were. They have not changed since I saw you on Friday. So you know kind of what to be thinking about. So with your first question, let's say you decide you want to do this question about coal mining and how all of that happens today and whether it's similar to what we imagine for Billy and his Uncle Jim. And so these are the big questions that you want to answer. You've decided. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into that this question area. You're going to click on View Question. This is what I see. You're going to see something different. You're going to see the question here, if I remember correctly, and then you'll see a box over here where you can type your answer and then turn it in. So that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to type your response to whichever question you choose and turn it in. The catch is that because we're moving to the Google Classroom, you need to make sure you include a couple things. Make sure that you have told us what book you're reading. So if you are reading Audacity, please tell us first, hey, I'm reading Audacity. Let us also know, and I chose question 1, which is this. So let us know what book you're reading. Let us know what the question was, and then include your response. Within your response, you want to talk about at least one example from your book that can help kind of prove your answer. Okay, so you want to refer to something that you read in your book that relates to the question. So, example, in this first question for Billy Creekmore people, it talks about Billy and his Uncle Jim and how they've had really hard jobs in the past. His Uncle Jim has. And one of the jobs that he talks about is the coal mines. So the first question is, what do you know about coal mining in the early 1900s? If you don't know anything about coal mining, that's fine. But the book should give you a good idea of some of the things about coal mining because Uncle Jim talks a little bit about it. Billy makes a note that he sees Uncle Jim with coal dust on his hands and it never seems to wash off. So can you kind of figure some things out? You can do some Googling. That is fine. Can you figure out what coal mining was like in the early 1900s? And could you relate that back to something in the text that you read that kind of shows us that, yeah, that was coal mining in the 1900s? And then we have a couple of questions about comparing what it might have been like as a coal miner in the 1900s to what it might be like in the 21st century. How might life have been harder for Uncle Jim? What are things that we know about Uncle Jim and coal mining that kind of made his life hard versus how it might be in the 21st century? Okay, so you want to make a connection to your book. You want to reference something that you saw in the book to kind of prove some of your thinking. Try to reference the page numbers that this happened on, especially if it is a very specific quote. If you have already posted your response to Goodreads, you will have a link in your document where you can click to go back to that Goodreads response. You can find your answer and you can copy and paste it into the question box. Just make sure that you make those adjustments where you need them. So make sure that you're letting the class know this is the book I was reading. This was the question that I answered. And then make sure that within your answer, you are including some evidence from the text and possibly a real life connection to back up some of your thinking, especially if it's a very opinionated one. I think that should be about it for that. So you will check that you understand that. Your first post into that question box will be due the end of the day on Wednesday. On Friday, you will go in and you will have an opportunity to respond to your classmates thoughtfully, but I will give you more specific directions about how that will work on Friday. So I don't want you responding to your classmates until then, so that way we're giving everyone an opportunity to post their initial discussion. And then the very last thing is that stating kind of where your grade is coming from for this week for the work that you're doing. Very specific grading is going to be happening for this with a rubric, and I'll be providing feedback as well. So you want to understand that your grade for this week is going to involve that initial post to the essential question in the discussion. And then it's also going to include consideration of your response to your classmates. And again, you'll receive directions for that on Friday. So once you click that box and say you understand, it'll send you to this next part of the form. And this is the part that is important. If you have any questions, maybe you have 1 or 2 questions that you just want clarification on, like, can I work on this early before Wednesday? The answer is yes. So don't ask that question because I just answered it. Yes, you can work on this earlier before Wednesday if you want. You're more than welcome to knock it out. Just make sure you check in and say that you understand everything. But if you have a simple question, you're more than welcome to ask it. And then I will check in the responses on this every so often to email you with a response. It might not be immediate because I might be chatting with somebody else or I might be responding to somebody else. But I will get back with you. Now, this last part, if you want to talk through something, you're like, like one of those situations where you just want a seminar pass so you can come talk to me about something or show me what's going on. If you're in that situation, this last box is for you. So the question is whether you want to request a message chat or not. So this would be through Google Hangouts. I'm not doing a video chat with you guys, but I will do a message chat. So this is just like a chat room sort of, we'll type back and forth to each other live. So this is a little bit faster than emailing back and forth, especially if you feel like you need to talk it out a bit, then we can talk it out. It's like texting basically, but on the computer. Okay. So if you're good, you can say, no, I'm good. I don't need to do a message chat. But if you have a lot of questions or you want to talk things out, say yes. And then what will happen is you'll want to check your email every so often. I will send you a link to a chat for me and you. So you're not having to ask questions in front of the rest of the class. It's just there for you to join in that chat so we can talk through the things that you have questions about. And you won't have to feel like any question is a stupid question. You can ask whatever questions you have and we'll talk you through it. So when you're finished with that, you'll press submit and then you are done and you can move on and begin work back in the classroom. So like I said, this is second periods, but fourth period, yours looks exactly the same. If you have questions, please let me know. I'm more than happy to make sure that I'm walking you through the process so you understand everything. If you're struggling to understand your book or you want to talk through chapters, again, that's something that you can post in the question box or you can request a chat for that. Even though my office hours say that I'm available from 11 to 1, I will email you back as soon as I see those emails. So feel free to email me at any time. But there are better times than others to request live chats. So, and if I need to start scheduling people in for having a message chat, I can do that too. I think that is it. Hopefully I haven't been too long-winded. Hopefully you're very clear on what is going on. Again, if you need any help, feel free to ask. That is what I'm here for. I am stuck in my house, not doing much, as many of you are. So we're all in the same boat together. So anyway, I think that's it. I will see you guys on the other side of the screen.